Hey there, thank you for tuning into Duckbricks, and welcome to another episode of BIONICLE Fanon Reviews, where I review every single fan-created canonized BIONICLE model. These are not official sets, but instead have been officially accepted into the BIONICLE Generation 1 canon, either via official LEGO contests like the Dark Hunters / Rahi contest from 2005, which is what this is from, or from the more modern TTV canonization contests, which are actually currently ongoing and have Greg Farshty as the herald for canonization, given that he is essentially the only story team member remaining at the LEGO group and has the authority to canonize models. The model we are looking at in particular today is Lurker. He is a Dark Hunter and a particularly vicious one. His backstory is a simple one. He just loves to murder people. He murdered at least one person on his main island and as a result was exiled. Instead of going back and trying to win their acceptance, he just decided to take up odd jobs here and there for the simple sake of being able to kill people. Eventually, the Shadowed One caught wind of this, and since he does not like competition, he invited Lurker to become a Dark Hunter himself, accepting him into the fold and using him as a blunt instrument in some of the more bloodier missions that the Dark Hunters were embarked on. Lurker expressed a strong disdain for any ranged weapons and instead preferred to fight hand-to-hand with blades and swords.
So uncivilized.
Although he wasn't exempt from using a Haga plasma cannon here and there to revel in the destructive capabilities of the long-range projectile beam launcher. So he does prefer fighting hand-to-hand, which is why you can see all these blades and claws sticking out of him. And that's essentially what his backstory is. There's one kind of funny detail that I will note, is that as part of his backstory, he asked to have 2 Toa masks or Kanohi fitted to his shoulders to make it appear that he won them in a fight, but he actually didn't. He just happened to find 2 Kanohi laying around and place them on his shoulders to make it seem like they're trophies of battle. Kind of a funny personality quirk of him to kind of build himself up more and make his enemies fear him just a little bit more. In the recent BIONICLE story, he was tasked on a mission to discover whether or not a Toa had actually killed Makuta Pterodax, although of course this was cut short when Makuta Pterodax revealed that he was actually in control of the entire Matoran Universe and had not been killed by Takanuva. But without further ado, let's just get into this review. I review these models on 4 main points, the first of which is Posability. So can I get this into good positions without having it keeping on falling down? Are there unique things that I can do to pose this to make it appear dynamic and interesting? And so on and so forth. Number 2 is building techniques. So how well is this built? Does this simply recycle things from sets, or is there actually a bit of ingenuity being put into this? And does it use unique parts and things that you would not expect to see used in that configuration? Number 3 is just general aesthetics, completely agnostic of the story in terms of how intimidating does this look? Does this look like someone you wouldn't want to cross in a fight? And just does he fit in well as a hardened warrior? And number 4 is how well does it fit in universe? So for this point, I'll be bringing along example builds and sets from the BIONICLE universe to compare against him and see just how well it makes sense that this is a Dark Hunter in the BIONICLE universe. But without further ado, let's just dive right into the review and take a look at the Dark Hunter Lurker. Alright, so here we can see a 360-degree turnaround of Lurker the Dark Hunter, so you can see all sorts of building techniques and different parts usages used for his build. I will say that there are a few very minor color substitutions, although the build is pretty much exactly the same. These are mostly defined to the way that the masks are mounted. I used a different color of a Technic beam because I just simply didn't have the right Technic color beam on me, as well as using, of course, some slightly different color pieces for the tail here. There's an armor missing, but for the most part, this is basically exactly what you would see in the build. The build is pretty perfect. You can see on some of the feet, there's a silver piece or a black piece, but other than that, this is essentially what you would see for the build. The build is exactly how it should be in canon, and hopefully these very minor discrepancies will not pose a significant challenge while reviewing. So removing him from this turnaround, let's now take a look at the main points, starting off with just posability. So here is Lurker. Let's take a look at how easy it is to pose this character because you can see there is a lot going on here. So obviously his legs are using a pretty unique tactic. It's not just a standard kind of style of legs. He has these more centaur-like digitigrade legs like so. You can see that he can move around his upper leg pretty easily, and there's not too much friction here, but it is pretty refined and constricted here. I mean, you can move the leg a little bit, but the Vaki headpiece being used here kind of restricts the motion a tad. This leg piece you pretty much can't move too much because of the Nuva armor, but honestly that's not too much of a con to me, because despite having multiple joints in his leg, it actually makes it feel a lot more solid and feel like an actual leg that cannot be physically moved other than the actual position that it's in. So it kind of gives it a more animalistic look and actually does make it fit in a lot better. You can also see that he has these 3 claws on his feet, but otherwise the feet move and articulate exactly as you would expect, just a standard ball joint being used here. He is a little bit back heavy, as you can see, with the addition of these stinger arms and a tail, although it's not nearly as bad as a lot of the other models out there. In terms of the arms, as we move up, he again can move his arms relatively well, although there is a little bit of restriction due to the way that the Hound Nuva piece is mounted here, and actually his hand is all just one piece. So you can see that he doesn't actually have an individual hand. This is all just one piece here. Again, not a big deal, but really there's only 2 points of articulation in the arms. The one unfortunate thing though is that his legs cannot quite support the weight of his body, so you can easily see them kind of bending down there and being a little bit hard to stand as I move him around. That being said, this is one of the models where if you do own some of these CCBS friction add-on joints, there's no reason not to use them in the legs, because I mean it just works out perfectly and allows him to stand up a lot better. As we move on to the back, and you can see this incredibly detailed torso here, you can see that the way that the tail and the stinger arms are mounted are pretty basic. Nothing too crazy going on. I mean, you can use them to sting and attack people, but there's nothing crazy going on in terms of the building techniques or parts usages. They're just very standard Rakshi limbs and female-female connectors just stacked together to allow you to have these stingers. The same pretty much goes for his tail, which can either go above his head and act as a stinger that strikes above him, or we could have it kind of moving off along the side here to kind of be an accessory to how he's fighting. But nothing too crazy going on with the articulation on the, let's say, back accessories here. When we move into the head, it's kind of more of the same. You can just kind of move the head all around, although unfortunately, depending on how you position the hands here and the eyes, you can very easily get him in a very awkward looking mode where his eyes kind of splay outwards. It's really not being held in by anything, so you kind of have to mess around with it and kind of make sure that you're only holding it from this particular angle, because as soon as you squeeze it like this, it just doesn't look good. But that's really all there is to say about articulation and posability. Yes, it is a little bit difficult to make him stand up straight, especially with no friction joints, but it's not nearly as bad as many of the other models that I have witnessed, and it is still pretty good, especially for a model of this size and using such a unique build for the legs. I would have expected it to be far worse than how it is, which, as it is right now, yes, you can see just then it kind of tends to fall backwards a little bit, but again, it's not bad at all, and not something that I'll complain about too much over the course of this review, because quite frankly, I've seen far worse. But now let's get into the building techniques. Now, this is a model that really takes the full advantage of the BIONICLE system, the LEGO system, and even Technic, and this is built extraordinarily well and uses a lot of parts in really unique ways. I'm actually a big fan of this model because you can see there's so many unique parts usages here, from the Vaki spines or the Vaki kind of neck pieces here used as armor that blends in perfectly well with how his foot is set up, to the fact that they used Toa Metru torsos as claws, which surprisingly works out really well. You actually got articulation in the hand here, or the fingers. You can kind of squeeze his fingers together. It looks like his claws are very dangerous, very sharp. It's a really good parts usage of the torso piece being used as a hand for a figure of this scale, which is not really something that you may expect from this. The head is also done really well with the different colors of Technic pieces, making it look like he actually has a mouth. He's almost grinning or snarling at you. The plus axle on the Technic piece here actually does add a lot to the detail of his teeth almost. You can see that the different colors of the beams here actually make it look like this is all part of his head and teeth. So
That's done really well, and it's all built around a standard Vaki head, which you can barely see. You can only really see it when I move this tooth piece down, but once you put it up, it's pretty hidden, and it works out really well. The other thing that I really like about this build is the way that the torso is built. It is a very, very unique design, super technic heavy, not something I ever would have been able to reverse engineer on my own without instructions, but it combines a Vaki torso, a Rakshi head, technic panels, an entire Vaki foot, all in very unique ways. And actually this piece here is just attached by ball joints, but it's attached in such a way that everything sticks well together. Nothing is really in danger of falling off or falling apart. It's just a very solid build, and the torso is easily the best thing about this model. It is an extremely advanced technic build, especially when you compare it to a lot of the other fan-created canonized models, which quite frankly are nowhere near as good as how this is built. However, there are a few things that are not absolutely perfect about this. I'd say that the way that these stingers are built and mounted almost feels like it was a last-minute addition. It's nowhere near as advanced or complex or even as cool looking as the rest of the build. And there are a few awkward things with the arms. In particular, the way that the How Nuvas are mounted makes it such that they can very easily fall off to the side here. You can see that they can really quickly flop over to the side. Yes, this does allow you to raise his arms up a little bit more, but then when you bring him down, they kind of are sticking out at a weird angle. And the same kind of goes to the back here. They added a Technic piece to bulk up the back of the arm. I'm not really sure why this is there. It doesn't really do anything and really just serves to kind of get out of whack. The other thing is that the masks are also very easy to knock off accidentally if you don't have them positioned just right. The other thing is that if you look closely at the way that the tail is mounted here, it's really only mounted by a single Technic axle, and depending on the way that you have your legs flexed out or the way that things are positioned, it's very easy to kind of get this out of whack and very easy to move around. That being said, it is kind of salvaged because it has these two black pieces being used, and if you really squeeze the legs together, it's in no danger of kind of falling apart. So that is something I really like about it, although the fact that there are so many ball joints being used in the construction of this makes it a little bit finicky to play with. As we move on from posability and general building techniques, there are a few things I do have to note that I actually do really like about this. I love the integration of Lego system chain pieces. You can see obviously a chain going down the front here. There's also a chain as a necklace around his neck. It really gives him a very distinct personality and style to him that isn't really used in any other Bionicle build or set. Of course, you had some chains featured in the Huki sets in 06 and 07, but nothing really to this extent, and that really makes him kind of stand out and feel unique as a character and someone who would outfit himself in some kind of chain weaponry, or even just for aesthetics. He put them on because he thought they looked cool. I also love the use of the silver Kopaka sword here. Now, I actually was very surprised. I did not realize this piece came in silver, but in fact it did in a very obscure Technic set. It was used as a rotor blade to a helicopter back when Lego was doing all sorts of crazy stuff with Technic. So this is a pretty hard piece to get, but it looks really great on this model. I love how it's kind of mounted to his hand, so he can use it almost like as an extendable blade. Even though you can't really rotate it at all, you can get the feeling that it's something that he would stick out of the front of his hand, almost like a Wolverine claw type thing that he would use to slash away at his opponents. Now, moving on to overall aesthetics, this is where the model really shines. It looks absolutely fantastic. Even with the simplicity of the upper claws here, it just looks really great and very formidable as a Dark Hunter. You can see that as I rotate him to different positions and different angles, you can really see how the color scheme blends perfectly together with the Mata red to the dark red to the black, and the silver and gray highlights really make it stand out. And I actually really like the use of the gray up here. It almost feels like these are mechanical add-ons that he's fitted to his back and not actually part of his actual body, unlike the tail, which does actually feel like it's part of his body because the tail itself is dark red and Mata red. I love the way that the shaping on the torso makes it such that these colors really perfectly blend in together, and he even has a heart light from a Lego stud to kind of signify his life force and his strength behind him. I also really enjoy how the head is created, and specifically how his eyes are, using a transparent Technic piece here that makes it really seem like his eyes are glowing, and it's held in very well by using the Technic hose pieces in a very unique manner as well. As we move on to the back of the model, it's pretty much covered in all sorts of shapes. Let me take a look. As we move kind of this claw down, you can see how well the integration of this Toa Metru shoulder piece has been fit in with the top of him, which has these Borok teeth being used to kind of continue along the shaping here, curving perfectly down to the dark red Throwbot foot being used here. Just all sorts of really smart and really unique parts usages. Now, again, he isn't the most stable of builds. He can kind of tend to fall over a little bit if you're not careful, but that being said, you can still get him into really great and dynamic poses, and you can see that he can look like a very threatening build if he needs to be, which is something I really like about this model, just the very dynamic poses that you can get him in. There's all sorts of arms sticking out of him and different things you can do with his appendages that really make him unique and stand out. You can get him into really cool looking stuff, and I think the way that the feet are built, which have this very unique non-humanoid style to them, really adds a lot to the style of this model and makes him stand out amongst a lot of the other builds. I think that this was a great choice to use for a very brutal, savage model like this one, and it was definitely something that fits perfectly with his character. You can see all sorts of angles. It pretty much looks good at every angle, and the Kanohi mask on his shoulder using the Hound Nuvas as shoulder armor is just the icing on the top of the cake. They look really cool, and it's really funny to me how in universe he never actually defeated a Toa with these. He just put them on to make himself look more intimidating, which fits right in with his personality. But now that we've covered the first 3 points of posability, building techniques, and aesthetics, let's now zoom out and take a look at how this looks next to some representative samples of other Dark Hunters and beings in the Bionicle Matoran universe.
Alright, so for the final point of this review, I have brought Lurker alongside a few other representative samples from the Bionicle universe. This is Fire Dracax, another red-themed Dark Hunter, so they kind of fit in pretty well together. I've brought over Toa Vakama as a size comparison to one of the Toa Metru, and I've also brought over Turaga Vakama just to put alongside him. It was mentioned that during one of his missions, in order to continue to force Matoran to pay for Dark Hunter protection, he murdered every single Turaga on the island, so you can very easily see this guy defeating this guy in battle very easily, sadly. So you can see that it does fit in relatively well with some of the other red-themed Bionicle characters. However, I will say that the complexity of the build and torso almost serves as a point against it, because it's just so dense and detailed in the torso and the chains being used. It almost feels like it doesn't quite fit in the Bionicle universe. It's almost a little bit too over-detailed, and compared to the simplicity of the Turaga or the simplicity of even the Toa Metru, this is so detailed and so wild and crazy that you kind of have to suspend your disbelief that these are maybe approximately the same scale that a Toa could battle this guy in combat without being completely crushed. But other than that, it is a very intimidating figure. You can really see that it is a lot taller than a lot of the other denizens of the Matoran universe. And for that, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 in terms of believability in universe. He scales very well alongside a fellow Dark Hunter. He's a little bit too tall compared to a Toa and Turaga, but that's not a huge deal, and you can definitely very easily see this guy completely destroying Turaga and posing a significant threat to Toa. But moving over these comparison models over to the side here, let's just take a look at the main build and move into the other 3 categories, starting off with overall aesthetics. Now, aesthetics is something I really love about this build, from the really unique way that the legs are shaped to have this kind of animal-esque look, to the way that he has the Kanohi mounted on his shoulders, to even the choices of colors used for these stingers to make them look artificial compared to his actual body. This is a very good model that excels at looking formidable and looking like someone who you would not want to mess with. So in terms of overall aesthetics, agnostic of the story, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10 because this model simply looks incredible. I love the chain details, the necklace, the spikes, everything about it is really great for the most part. And if I had to take off a few points, like to prevent it from being a 10 out of 10, some strange things in the way that the Kanohi masks are mounted, to specifically the way that the back arms are built very simplistically, to even the way that it's very easy to get the leg elements out of whack. All of those kind of take away a little bit from aesthetics, but overall it's very good. It looks like an animal or a beast that you wouldn't want to cross. In terms of the building techniques, but now moving on to building techniques, taking a look at some of the unique parts usages used in this model, I can say that I was very pleased with the very unique and inventive ways to use pre-existing Bionicle parts in new ways. For example, you have the Toa Metru torsos here, and let me just bring over Vakama again. That's his torso. This guy's hand is this guy's entire body. So it's a very unique way of displaying this model. I really enjoy how it looks, as well as using the Vaki spines here as almost guards or knee guards or kind of armor alongside him. This looks really excellent, and I actually really like how well these all kind of blend together and work together alongside this entire model. I also enjoy the parts usages of the Rakshi head being used as his chest plate, the Technic pieces used around the head and around the torso, and while there are a few kind of questionable things, like how easy it is to get the head out of whack, how easy it is to get the armor kind of splayed out here, and the fact that the legs are a little bit strange and hard to pose, all of that kind of factors into the building technique score, which I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. A lot of very inventive stuff going into it, and just a few minor quibbles and stuff that doesn't quite work out perfectly that prevent this from being a little bit higher. But then moving on to Poseability, that's probably going to be the lowest score out of all of them. While you can see that it is possible to get him into good poses, it's kind of difficult to prevent him from falling backwards. He is very back heavy, and the fact that if you do not use friction joints on the legs, it's very easy for him to fall backwards like he just did. So it's not the worst by any means. I've encountered far, far worse in terms of posing, but it's not the best either, and it's also kind of awkward to have to continually pose these back arms, and the fact that there's so much sticking out of his back makes him very easy to fall over backwards. So unless you kind of fiddle with it for a good amount of time, it's very easy to have him fall over. So that's why I'm going to give Poseability a 6 out of 10. Could be better, but it's pretty good. And compared to some of the better models in Poseability, like say Certavis, which is just an Anika build, or Artaka, which is on the lower end of being far less posable than this character, I'd say it falls pretty much smack in the middle of what I'm expecting from a canonized model. It's going to be nowhere near as stable as an actual set, but I kind of like how I'm able to get it into relatively good poses without it falling over. So for that, it's getting a 6 out of 10. But that about wraps up this review. What do you guys think of Lurker the Dark Hunter? Let me know down in the comments below. What do you think of this model? Do you like it? Do you not like it? And are you planning on building this on your own? Let me know, and of course, stay tuned to Duck Bricks for even more LEGO and Bionicle news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Dark Hunter, Rahi, and otherwise canon Bionicle build reviews are coming out every Monday, so stay tuned for next week to check out our next review. Thank you again all for tuning in, and bye-bye for now.